It is April 7th, 2022, and this is our, I think, the first of the month Police Accountability Board meeting. Yep. Okay. Ms. Pacheco, can you please do the roll call?
Yes, I can. Chair Wilson,
Here.
Vice Chair Tucker,
Here.
Member Nikolov,
Here.
Member Harrison,
Hubba hubba.
Wow.
Member Settle,
You're muted.
she said she's here. Thank you.
There.
And Member Harvey seems to still be having connection issues.
Yep, I just reached out.
Okay.
There we
And
go.
absent tonight is Member Brown.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. So we, next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from 3/24/22. And I believe everybody should have had a chance to look at those. Okay. So then I will, if that's the case, then I will go ahead and look for a motion to approve minutes from 3/24/22.
So moved.
I motion.
Okay. All in favor of approving minutes from 3/24/22?
Aye.
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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5, and I will have to count Harvey as abstaining.
Yes. Alrighty, thank you. And next on the agenda is the staff report. No? Okay.
All right, folks. This is Connor Dwyer Reynolds. Good evening, board members. My job tonight is to give a brief report on what's been going on at the staff level. If you'll give me 1 second to pull up the appropriate slideshow, we can get started. Sorry about this. Okay. Okay, so today's staff's report is gonna, nope. Sorry, everybody. Again, excuse me for this.
Thanks, sweetheart.
It's going fast. Okay, so we're going to cover 4 things tonight during the staff report. First is I'm going to give you the public a brief update on the finalization of PAB's staffing model. I'm going to go over some requests from the Police Accountability Board Alliance, talk about the research that the staff conducted at the board's request about both short-term PAB board work as well as our long-term board work. So happy to announce a major step forward for the PAB. PAB has been on a long journey over the last year to build out and create an organizational infrastructure for its staff. This has included creating job descriptions, recruiting for positions, and most importantly, getting Civil Service Commission approval for our jobs. In the city, you can't hire a position until the local Civil Service Commission approves of it. So we sent earlier this year a final vision of PAB's work. We've been revising our vision for the last year, gaining new knowledge and experience. And in this final staffing model, it would be create the last about 20 or so odd jobs at PAB to get us to full staff of 57, and also to increase the diversity of our team. The goal was to do something kind of bold, eliminate requirements for degrees and the need to take civil service exams for every position at PAB that conducts investigations into incidents of police misconduct or policy or doing case management revolving investigations. Today, the City Civil Service Commission approved of this model, which is really phenomenal. It's going to give us such a better opportunity to recruit diverse, local, qualified people. New York State will have to sign off on the absence of exams for our people, but over the short term and near term, this gives us a chance to recruit in a much more broad way And I'm just thrilled and very thankful for the board for pushing very hard on this for the last 6-7 months. It's been a priority of this board to eliminate barriers to particularly Black and Brown Rochesterians from working at PAB. And this is just a major accomplishment, and huge thanks to the Evans administration for partnering with PAB on this landmark. So thank you. So I attended the PAB Alliance General Meeting last night and informed them about the board's ongoing discussions regarding potentially requesting a change to the charter to allow people with ties to the Rochester Police Department in a family way to work for PAB. They informed me that individuals will be sending input to me via email, which I will pass along to the board on that issue. In a related sense, though, the Alliance is doing work regarding interviewing candidates for the board this weekend. There's an Alliance seat that is open at the present moment, and the Alliance is interviewing candidates for nomination. And they have requested that, they're in a bit of a bind because they really want to give detailed sense of time, commitments, tasks, and schedule for what these people will be doing. And so they have asked the board to provide essentially a job description for board members that's more specific than the one that the city issued, 2 or 3 years ago, which didn't say what time commitments would be or really what the duties would be. And there was also a request to have board members begin tracking hours formally. That would allow the Alliance and the community to have a better sense of the real commitments, day-to-day commitments of this board. So I just wanted to communicate that information to all of you. So now I can turn to the research that the policy staff at PAB did at the board's behest in the last couple of weeks. There were 2 kind of buckets of work for the board. First, I'm sorry. I'll slow down a little bit. So the board asked us to conduct 2 different kinds of research into how much work the board members have to do in the short term, that is in the next couple months before they start hearing cases, and how much work that they're supposed to do in the long term, that is on a regular basis after they start hearing cases. So I'm going to go through the first bucket of research, which really is talking about 3 different things that board members have to do. The first is reviewing and finalizing both the rules for investigations, how we conduct investigations, and the disciplinary matrix, which is the set of guidelines that will allow board members to make uniform recommendations to the police chief about what should happen in the wake of confirmed officer misconduct. The board also has to establish some rules and structure for board work and governance, thinking about long-term things like committee structure, rules of order, these kind of things that the board's rules committee is generally tasked with doing and creating. And then finally, performing training to hear cases. And so I'll briefly go through the staff's discussion of what these things will specifically look like. The staff expects that the board will have to conduct between 10 and 15 hours of work on the matrix. There should be a rough draft of a disciplinary matrix ready in about 2 weeks. The board staff have come up with it, and we're going to get it to our consultants at SMK for review and input before it goes to the board members. And board members will have to give input on things like, well, just about everything. Things like how we classify misconduct, creating consequences. The importance of the staff work to this point has been doing research and creating a framework so that the board has something concrete to work with. But at the end of the day, we really need to have a matrix that is truly of, for, and by the board. The board also has to review the rules for investigations. We expect this will take less time because it's a little bit less generative. It's more discussing different options for very concrete parts of the rules. We should have a draft of these rules ready tomorrow. We've incorporated a lot of input from the city's law department and our own staff to get these things in a much better place than they were in a couple months ago. Again, the board would have to give input on things like how board members make determinations, how that actual hearing process would work, the depth of on-scene response, what is it that board members truly want to see our people do at the scenes of incidents, and deadlines for information transfers. This is such a crucial thing because what the board expects in terms of deadlines from the city will really determine how quickly these investigations will operate. So having the board be able to truly give its input and stamp onto these rules is very important, but doing it in a structured way so that the board can make truly informed decisions is why this will take probably between 5 to 10 hours to do. And then this is just some of the work that we can expect, the board to do is for the rules and structure for board governance. We expect this to take somewhere between 7 and 15 hours, it's a little less certain. Things like establishing really clearly once and for all what the rules of our order are for board meetings, outlining the responsibilities of the chair and vice chair in this new era of hearing cases, clarifying the board's relationship with city council and especially the relationship with the council's liaison position, and then potential considering restructuring of board committee structure in light of the long-term board time commitments. So all in all, over the next couple of months, there's probably a need for the board to invest somewhere between 20 and 50 hours of work. That's quite a bit of work. I'm happy to discuss some possible ways the board could address that work, but that wasn't part of the research ask. It was just to discuss time commitment. And then of course, training. This is another part of that 30 to 50 hours. And I won't get into the details of that because the training committee can talk a little more about it. Now I want to turn to the long-term commitments for board work. This is the kind of work the board will, time commitments for the long-term work of the board, which really falls into 3 categories. The first is hearing cases, reviewing materials, making determinations about potential incidents of misconduct, and making recommendations about what should be done. That's one bucket of work. Another bucket of work is reviewing policy, looking at systemic issues in the Rochester Police Department and relying on board staff to provide information about that so that there can be policy proposals coming out of PAB. And then finally, kind of board governance / community engagement work, the normal thing that you'd expect a nonprofit board to do, which is oversee and direct the executive director and maybe have committees on things like budget, youth, et cetera. So I want to start with the way that we did this research. We looked at 20 different PABs across the country. We figured out what their duties were. We figured out what the range of time commitments actually were. And we also looked to receive direct quotes from people who served on these boards who could talk about what the actual time commitments looked like. So I'm going to start with a theme that came up in this research, which is really the idea that there's almost always a big discrepancy between what people think the time commitments will be and what the time commitments actually are. So this is a quote from people who are involved in Portland, Oregon's old PAB. And it's important to know that this was called the COAB. They only did policy and systems review, right? PAB has to do 3 buckets. They just had to do 1 bucket, okay? And this is a quote about that agency. The application said participation would take 10 hours per month, but several past and present members said they spent 20 or 30 hours per week on the PAB, from research and homework to subcommittee meetings and community engagement. Okay, in Urbana, Illinois, an agency that only did complaints, when the chair of that board resigned 6 months into the work, they said this: when I was recruited, it was essentially a commitment of about 25 hours for the year. Today, there are some weeks where I've spent more than 25 hours on PAB-related activities. Again, this is for a board that just reviews and hears complaints. And again, Urbana, Illinois is much smaller than Rochester. So when we're talking about case size, think about what a much smaller city deals with. Then you have a place like Ann Arbor. Again, a smaller city, but it's much more like PAB in the sense that they do complaints, policy, and engagement. This is what the chair of that board had to say. This is not a job where you can show up in a meeting once a month and go back to your regular life. There are many of us who work 20, 30 hours a week on police oversight in addition to our actual jobs. Okay, so these quotes are not outliers, they are consistent theme that people almost always underestimate the amount of work that this actually causes volunteer board members to have to commit. So with that in mind, I want to walk through some of the conclusions of this research. And I'm happy, again, this was all laid out in a memo to the board. I'm just reviewing some of this for all of you. The first bucket of work is, and I just want to talk about the overview here, which is this. In the long term, our research suggests that board members may face anywhere from 10 to over 40 hours of work each week. Again, the methodology here is looking at 20 other boards, and the time spent by board members ranged from anything from just 2.5 hours a week to over 50 hours a week. There's a really wide range of time commitments, and that's because every PAB is different. Some PABs don't do much more than just occasionally meet to say, we're going to talk about what the police department can do differently, and it's just kind of getting together to talk. And then there's boards that are much similar to this PAB, where board members have a bunch of different responsibilities. And again, the trend is towards agencies like ours doing more work. So on average, if you average all 20 of these together, they spend about 10 hours per week on agency-related work, okay? And again, that's an average of boards that don't have any staff support and don't do much towards agencies that are much more fully fleshed out, okay? And again, you can break down this work into 3 buckets: case review, which can take anywhere between 2.5 to 20 hours per week; police review and community engagement, which can take 5 to 20 hours a week; and then basic agency oversight, which can take about 2.5 to 5 hours per week. Again, this is a really wide range of work. There's a lot of uncertainty about what it can be. But the thing I want to talk in depth about is what I think it's clear that the board cares most about, which is hearing cases. How much time will it actually take us to hear cases? And so we looked at a few agencies that publicly release data on how much time it takes. And there's not a lot of agencies that do this. So for most agencies outside of Rochester, the average hour is 2.5 to 3.5, right? There's no place that we looked where it was less than 2.5 hours per case. And that involves reading over the written materials, getting a chance to discuss and decide as a group, hear a presentation from an investigator, and then make a decision, okay? So that's an average. So that involves long cases and short cases, okay? 2.5 to 3.5 per case. Now, we also have data from the Rochester Civilian Review Board, the agency that we replaced. Those board members, what they would do is they would get paper copies of things. They would go down into the basement of City Hall, and they would have investigators from the police department present to them on how much time it would take, on what the investigation involved. They get a chance to ask questions, look at some evidence, etc. In recent years, according to the reports of the CRB, the average case review took anywhere between 5 and 7 hours. 5 and 7 hours. Okay, so there's a range. We can expect cases on average, they might be as little as 2.5 hours. It might be 3 times as much as 7 hours. It's hard to know. It's really hard to know. But the most important thing isn't just how much time it takes to look at a case, it's how many cases you're going to get. Okay, and so in the current proposed framework, the way that board members will look at cases is they will each serve on a 3-member panel, which means that the board at any given time can be hearing 3 different cases, if that makes sense, right? So it's not that the 9-member board all hears one case, they each are broken into panels of 3. That's just, that 3 number is important. So how many cases would it take for the board to be hearing 1 case per week? Each board member just to be reviewing 1 case per week. About 150, okay, over an entire year. If you review 150 cases per year, that means that board members will each be reviewing one case per week. So just in terms of case review, that's 2.5 to 7 hours per week on average for the average case every week. If we get 150 reports coming in per year. Now that's a report less than every other day. When we initially proposed our budget, we expected to get about 500 complaints a year, somewhere around there, but a significantly smaller, a smaller number of those fully investigated and brought before the board, because a lot of complaints might not be in our jurisdiction, right? But even then, we were really uncertain about how many cases we're going to get. And so the question for the board is, do you expect to get 150 cases? Do you expect to get 300 in a year? It's a real open question. But if you expect to get 300 cases a year, you should expect to spend anywhere between 5 and 15 hours per week just hearing cases, right? And what's certain is that when we open our doors for complaints, we're going to get a lot more in our first couple months than just a complaint every couple days. We're probably going to get a flood of complaints, which means that the board will start out with a major caseload, right? Which means that, when the board starts first hearing cases, it's not going to be a slow ramp up. It's likely to be a significant number of cases, more than just one per week.
This is Shawnee Wilson. So I guess my question would be, is there, can we talk about help and about what that looks like? Because I know that from talking to you offline, some boards had actually had quite a bit of help and some boards had none. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about that, please.
Sure. So a major issue in figuring out how much time the board, this is Connor, major issue in figuring out how much time the board will take to review a case is staff support. Okay. If you have a lot of investigator support in terms of making reports clear, being able to present evidence, being able to be available to board members to walk things through, that can, in theory, reduce the amount of time that board members spend on a case. But if there's more complexity to the investigation, say because an agency has more access to information, body-worn camera footage, et cetera, that means that the more resources and powers a board have can make case review more lengthy. So PAB will probably have more staff support than the average PAB, which could reduce the amount of time you spend on cases. But we are likely to have a broader jurisdiction, which means we're going to accept more cases than other PABs. And we have more access to information, which means there's going to be probably more documentation presented to board members, right? It's not just that you're going to have to be reviewing documents around the incident. If you're making recommendations about discipline, you're going to be looking into the past actions of the officer. And that's a whole bunch of paperwork that the vast majority of boards do not look at, right? So there are reasons to think that more staff support might help, but there's also reason to think that no matter how much staff support you get, there's complex and difficult questions you're going to have to wrestle with that will take time. So again, it's very, very hard to estimate the amount of time. It could be less than these averages, but this is the best information we have to guide your decision-making. And I'll just interject to say, I'm happy to answer more questions. There is more board research we have around how much time it takes to do policy work and board governance work that I can dive into the details of.
We have member Harrison and then member Settle.
Connor, the thing that I can't evaluate out of this kind of information is that it's all totally speculative. We actually don't know how this is going to work. We don't know we don't have a process in place that we can critique. I've suggested that you put together a dummy case or two so that the board can get a feel for just exactly what your staff is going to produce and how we're going to have to deal with it. But otherwise, this is impressive, but it's speculative.
Member Settle?
You're
Oh,
on
you're
mute.
muted.
I spend my life telling other people that. But, I want to, first of all, strongly, in the strongest possible terms, push back against what I see as a sense of false urgency. And what I mean by that is I don't agree that all these things have to be done before we start seeing hearing cases. As far as I'm concerned, all that has to be done before we start hearing cases is the matrix and our training. The long-term governance decisions about the board do not have to be done before that. They can be worked out in time. A whole, sort of variety of other things I think can be worked out in time. So I think that we have to be sort of careful about, because I think, first of all, I think a lot of us we all, it's very nice to always have all our ducks in a row, but I think that there's a lot of pressure on all of us, to sort of have this all working in an order and all of that. And I have to say, Connor, you've done an unbelievable job of getting a staff together. And, I just can't think of better people to be working with. And it's incredible how that happened. But I also feel that, for those of us who, like the board members who've been putting in all these hours for 2 years, right? It's not sustainable. And we just can't keep loading on this sense of urgency. So I just want to be very careful and deliberate about what really is and isn't necessary in the short run and how we sort of think about that. So that's part one. Part two, I believe actually that we did already vote on the rules, right? We had that part done. That was in your list of things that had to be done, but we already did that. We're going to vote. I think we're going to talk today or vote today on the board rules, but we voted on those other rules. I have another question, which we haven't heard anything about, is that the charter says that in developing the matrix, we have to be consulting with and request input from the police chief, the locust club president, and the alliance. And I would like to sort of hear more about how that's happening, because that also seems like a part of the process, that I haven't heard about, but that needs to also happen for us to be getting the matrix put together. So if you could address that for us, I'd really appreciate it. And then one other final thing I want to say is I think that those sort of structural issues about governance and committees and so forth, I don't think the board has the expertise to really do that themselves. And I think that we have talked about that in the past, that even for those of us who have extensive experience with nonprofit boards, we've acknowledged that government boards are a horse of a different color, as they say, and that we really sort of, and again, that's why I don't want to have a sense of overwhelming urgency about this, that we need to maybe be more deliberative and maybe have some assistance in sort of thinking about some of those issues. Okay, so back to the matrix question.
This is Connor. So we can't get consultation on the matrix from the police union, the police department, or the alliance until the board kind of gets a sense of what it wants out of things. So that's where we're at with that. So, the research and the framing that the staff have been doing and are going to be doing with SMK are to present a field and framework for you all to really start moving in. I think that's that's the sequence for us, I think.
Thank you.
Dr. Harrison.
Connor, I would just like to, it just occurred to me that the thing that was really impressive about you here, when we were first doing the executive director search, was just how thorough you were in analyzing the job before you had even gotten to it. I think this is your characteristic run amok. That's a good thing, but I think it's over the top and needs to pull back a little bit.
Chair Wilson?
So I get the sense of urgency. I get it. We have a lot of work to do. And I think that, that the points that have been, submitted are pretty valid. And I'm also, thinking about giving the city the best that we have as far as hearing cases, and actually not just hearing, but investigating them, right? I don't like the ability of just hearing cases, because that's not what we're going to do. We're going to be investigating and then making a decision. So I just want to know if there's a way that we can have what, Dr. Harrison is asking for, like a test case to kind of run through and see how that's going to work. But I think my last question/statement would be, I know that you told me about working on general investigation, like investigation stuff for the board. And so can you tell me about some of the things that we'll need to do? Is that correct? Am I incorrect about that? Or is it just the matrix?
No, so this is Connor. It's some of this information that you're getting is going to help you decide how much involvement you want to have in these cases, right? And so we can happy to put together, and this is what SMK is doing, is pulling together like examples of these things. But part of the issue too is that we, as Bob says, we don't know till we get into the thing. And if it were up to me, I'd be able to see full information from within professional standards section. Right now, because we've adopted some of these investigations rules, right? Yeah, I don't want to say anything that would get me in trouble. What I will say is that I think that the ideal would be to have materials from the Rochester Police Department that you would be able to look at, right? That would be the ideal. And I will do some thinking about this, but to answer directly Bob's question, I think that there's still some, part of the reason we need the board to get its input on these rules is, I can't, how do I say this? I'm trying to think clearly here, my apologies. You want to have a clear process of what your work will exactly look like. But to have that process, we need to know how you want to do the work. Does that make sense? So there's a little bit of tension, and maybe I'm overthinking it. But I think that there's been some discussion of exactly what the board is going to do. And it's in the rules, the draft of the rules right now. And if we're comfortable with that, we can start thinking about how to move forward about this. But I want to make sure that you are comfortable with that.
Reverend Nikoloff.
Connor, are you able to, first of all, thanks again for all the research and the time you took to listen to board members and get a sense of this. I think it'll help the work. It's frustrating now, but to get on it, but I think it'll help the future boards a lot. And I think this is worth doing. So thank you for helping to get this conversation going. I guess something I would maybe helpful for me is, could you, and if you can't do this off the top of your head, no problem. Maybe we could do next meeting, is give us an example of some ranges of like the proportion of hours and work per case that a board member might spend, right? Like if we're trying to say, hey, we only have 15 hours of work, volunteer work on our calendars to give, right? Then what does that mean if active board participation is 10 hours a week or 15 hours a week? What does that mean for staff? What does that mean in terms of, right? Because I get that if we did 40 hours a week, we'd be hearing all the cases, probably not all of them even, but we'd be doing a job. But what are the trade-offs, I guess, right? And what are you concerned about trying to do when you say the staff can do more of that work, right? What does that look like in terms of staff and board work? Because it still feels a bit abstract to me, I guess, even though, and I know you're not just throwing this at us because it's like a nice show of your brilliance. Like I think I'm missing some connection that you're trying to make, and it would help me. Is that clear? Sorry, I know it's.
Yeah, so here's what it is. From the conversations we have with individual board members, there's a real range in current availability, right? I don't think that it appears to be that there are some people who have some flexibility in crisis moments to put in 10, 15, 20 hours of work per week. Most board members can't, right? And so if you assume that, you look, don't even know the details and just know that the average PAB that has as much power as us or way less, they spend 10 hours per week, that's hitting everybody's max already, right? And so I think the primary purpose of this is to show the board that you have a potential to do a lot of things, but the capacity to do it is really limited given how time consuming this stuff is. And so I think the reality of it is, case review is probably going to be all of your time. And then you're still probably going to have case backup because the board cannot review things as quickly as it can. So part of the reason I know, again, there's, the sense of urgency might not be justified, but I do want to get ahead. I want to suggest that there may be reason to get ahead of where you could be in 6 months, where there are many Rochesterians who filed complaints with PAB many months earlier who are not getting any results because we weren't prepared for the time commitment it would take for board review of cases. And so to your specific question, we can, if you say, I can spend 5 hours a week on board stuff, it's going to be all case review, likely, right? That's just going to be it. You sitting with the paperwork, you reading it.
I think that's helpful. Like kind of, when you did the proposal for the budget, you kind of built out like, here's what you get at 5 hours a week. Here's what you get at 10 hours a week. Seeing something like that visualized, or what you just described is helpful that way. Cause I think it's nice to know what the trade-off will be. I also appreciate that you're looking long-term. That's something you've brought as executive director and always had this bigger picture, and it's helped us in the past to be where we're at. So I do want to honor kind of that long view as well. But I also agree with Rabbi Jorah that I'd like to hear our first few cases really well rather than hear lots of them, and make sure that the public also has confidence in the process. And then, we can increase the volume and the pace as we also become more competent, and also as the public is able to build trust in seeing us do this. And I would hope that the council and the constituency would both want the same, that we would all want to make sure that we do this as best it can be. So if that means slowing down the pace and just taking a little longer, but being awesome, that's important too. And I also want to keep the long-term view in mind. So I think I agree with almost everything that everyone's said to this point, but it's helpful to hear you clarify that. Thank you.
This is Connor. Can I just respond to Reverend Nikoloff? The Oakland Police Accountability Board, it's called the Oakland Police Commission. They are a 9-member board who have very similar powers to PAB. They do not hear cases. They only engage in policy review, proposal, and they supervise the executive director. When they have a job description where they lay out all of the duties they do and all of that, and their expectation is that people volunteer 15 to 20 hours per week just on those tasks.
Okay.
So there are many examples of places that you could go. And I think the question for the board is, some of it is we can game out scenarios, but I think the hope of this research is to show that the scenarios are endless. If this board wants to commit 50 hours of work per week, it could. It could also decide to commit, a lot less.
Rabbi Settle?
So I'm going to say something else, but my first question, so who is on that Oakland board? Because not a lot of single moms, I assume, not a lot of, regular working folk who are supporting families and whatever, right? Because who's got that kind of time? So, I think that, I hope our community is very committed to having a really diverse representative group of people. And I would hope also that our community would understand that an unpaid board cannot be expected to work a half-time job, a 20-hour work week, right? Which is what some of us have been doing, or more. Chair Wilson, who has literally rearranged her whole life and her work life, to make sure this work gets done. I want to acknowledge that and honor that, but it should not be an expectation for serving on this board. So I think that, in that sense, we have to have some common agreement with the community and with the city council about what's realistic, and to think that, really, I think from, maybe we can talk about this, but I would say for most people, to say a 10-hour commitment is a hefty commitment for a volunteer board, 10 hours a week. That's a lot of time, right? And I know, I'll speak for myself, I have had to let go of every other commitment that I have except my work and my family. I'm somebody who has been very engaged in a lot of things, and I've had to say no to all of them because of the work that's been required. And I said when I got on the board that I would do what needed to be done. But I don't think it's really a sustainable, a realistic expectation. And I think that, so we have to sort of say, first of all, we have to ask, the board has to be able to have an honest discussion, given our different life circumstances. Is 10 hours a realistic commitment? Is 5, is 8? What is a realistic commitment? And then say, how do we structure the work given that realistic commitment? So, which is for now. And then if the community wants something different, if the council wants something different, then it has to be structured in such a way that it's possible for a diverse group of people in our community to do that work. I.e., if you want someone to work a half-time job, then I would say you have to see it as a half-time job, right? And not just rely on people who have income from some other source or something like that. So I think that has to be the framework for that discussion.
Okay. Chair Wilson?
Thank you so much, Rabbi Settle, for that. So as I've been talking to people about joining the board, I'm honest with them about the expectations that we've encountered so far. And that has been a deterrent. And so I think that there needs to be an honest conversation with City Council about what the expectations are. Realistically, because one of the things I don't want to happen is that, the board is blamed for what we're not doing. And also that the city needs to understand that, this could be potentially an avalanche of work. And the last thing I'll say is just a question directed to Mr. Dwyer Reynolds. So the CRB was paid for their work. How much were they paid per hour?
I have to look up the final number. It changed over time. Back in the 90s, it was, I believe, $35 per hour every 2 hours. I can get specific figures for the board if necessary.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing that answer. So,
We have Member Harrison.
One of the things that we haven't acknowledged, I think, but I think most of us recognize is that we've been going about this board business in a kind of a haphazard way. And I think we need to spend a little more time getting ourselves organized for board business, to be able to properly fit that into whatever expectations are time-wise.
We have Member Settle.
I just quickly want to say another thing I'd be interested to know is sort of the time commitments for other city boards. And also I gather there is one other city board where there is a city board where members are paid. And I would be interested to know what the pay is and what the time commitment for that board is.
I will just say, while I've got it, the Civilian Review Board was paid, the chair was paid $30 an hour for review, and everyone else was paid $22.50 per hour. But at the time, the Civilian Review Board members believed that that compensation was deeply inadequate and needed to be doubled.
We have Member Harvey. Oh, you were muted, Member Harvey.
I'm just thinking about the possibilities of 10 hours a week. And I haven't said anything because I finally got really committed to the hours that we are doing a week, and I think the hours that we spend are wise hours, good hours, hours doing what is necessary, no wasted time with this board. But I just know for myself, and so my hand would go up and come down and go up and come down because I would almost get tickled to think where, I'm a science teacher, not a math teacher, but I do know that if we're looking at 2 hours, at least 2 hours, and certainly not working 2 hours a meeting and not working on Saturdays and Sundays, that would be Monday through Friday, trying to fit in meetings really every day. That's tough. But I also realized this: when the cases start coming in, they're gonna come. When we start reviewing cases, we're gonna have a lot of work in front of us. So we can't be the police accountability board and not once we are fully out there working and not doing the work. The work has got to be done. So I just think I like all of the questions that are being asked. Sometimes my hand will come down because somebody's already asked the question, pay and how much, and benchmarking other boards as to what's going on there. Because even if we are the board who's setting the standards for the future board members, I think we're laying the groundwork. We're not going to be here always. but I think the groundwork for the PAB and the future PAB has to be set. And so I like the idea of, and I don't think anybody is saying it for me, or none of this is for personal gain, but I do think it's very necessary to have the conversations about benchmarking other boards, if there was pay, what kind of pay, because like Shawnee has done, just giving up her world to work for us, if we remain on the board, some of us are going to have to give up some more commitments that we have to fulfill the commitments of the board and the city, as our jobs are looking for us in terms of those commitments that we make. If you have any other commitments, there are a lot of people looking to us for commitments, but the city is looking to us for decisions and for action. And we've been here long enough building. And so we're gonna have to really make some hard decisions as we begin to progress on forward.
Okay. We have Executive Director Dwyer Reynolds. And wait, hold on a sec. Our interpreter's having some water.
I'll have some too.
All righty.
So I know this is Connor. I know this has been a long conversation, and I suppose it's time to end it. So I will just say this. The Board of Assessment gets paid $25 an hour, up to $200 a day. So the city does pay boards in the city. The thing I can say is that I'm happy to, the staff has a memo
Connor,
on
excuse me, how much were they paid? I missed that number.
$25 an hour.
Thank you.
What I will say is that I can provide a memo, the staff can provide a memo on payment for Police Accountability Board members across the country and some structures for working out the work. I know one way that some people do it is that the hearing of cases is done by a rotating panel of volunteer board members. You know, so that you have members of the community doing all of the hearing of cases, which means that you can have a big pool of people to do the hearing of cases, right? It's one way to do things, but anyway, I will certainly get the information about pay to all of you.
And please, city board time commitments.
City time commitments for Rochester, the city of Rochester?
City board time commitments, yeah.
Okay. All right, that sounds good. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the staff again for all of your hard work on this memo. I know that was a lot of data collection and research, so thank you for all of your work. Yes, Reverend Harvey.
Do we know the time that the city council spends each week in their meeting? I'm just asking. Do we have any idea of
That's a good question.
time that they spend?
I can be sure to ask.
You know, just curious.
That might be some of your, that'd be great to know for research purposes. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. We are going to move on. So next on the agenda is the chair report, which I do not have one today, this week. And then after that, we have our committee report, and we have rules committee. And I do believe there was something that rules committee was going to go over in this meeting. Is that correct, or am I incorrect?
Rules Committee,
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much, rules committee. You're up.
did you answer, Drew? Who's answered? What's?
I was
the
answering.
rules? Thank you. The Rules Committee met last week and mainly considered one thing, and that is the rules of order, I think they're called, that have been put together to guide us in how we conduct our meetings. The committee approved one change to that document. And I think Ms. Pacheco can't quite contain herself. She wants to read that.
sorry, except that, I'm sorry. We can't make that change because the charter has the language of the previous language.
The charter doesn't have,
It actually does, believe it or not.
no, I just finished looking at it just this afternoon. There's nothing in there about anything that resembles Robert's Rules of Order.
No, but it says that the chair shall facilitate and like run the meeting, whatever it says there.
It does say that.
Okay. Well, in that case, the Rules Committee doesn't have a report.
Except that we need to pass the rules and.
No, but we
they
don't
weren't- but they weren't sent- Were they sent to the board?
Sure, we don't have a report because no, I take that back. Madam Chair,
Yes.
the change that the Rules Committee was prepared to suggest is apparently inappropriate.
Okay.
And therefore, I move that the original rules document be approved by the board.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
second.
All right. So the motion is to approve the rules document as is, as has been submitted by Rules Committee. All in favor?
Okay,
Aye.
Do we want to
one,
discuss?
2, 3, 4. Harvey, are you voting in favor? Wonderful. And Settle in favor. Okay, carries unanimously. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Connor. May I interject, Chair Wilson?
Yes, go ahead.
We will make sure to get these rules translated into a brief training session and provide that to the board.
I can't wait.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Next on the agenda, we have old business from our previous meeting, which is I'm sorry, I'll slow down, conflict of interest rule. And I will go ahead and let Mr. Dwyer Reynolds, would you like to lead that conversation? Because I know that you've been speaking about this recently.
Just briefly, board members, I think that the request was to have some of the people involved in the authoring of the rule come. It's going to be easiest to have them come to the next board meeting, and that will also give the board the chance to get some input from the Police Accountability Board Alliance on this issue. And so my only recommendation would just be to table it until the next meeting.
All right, this is Shawnee. Does anybody have any objections to having that part of our discussion tabled? Okay. All right, so all in favor of tabling the discussion on conflict of interest?
Okay, 1, 2, I see Settle, Wilson, and Nikolov. Tucker, yes, and Harrison, yes. Okay, that
Okay.
is unanimous.
Thank you. Right, new business. We have the discussion of upcoming board work and type commitments, which we discussed at the beginning of our meeting. And we also, so the second proposal. Oh, yep,
Madam Chair,
yes.
this is probably inappropriate, but I've mentioned this before, but it's never been formally moved
Okay,
to request that the executive director prepare a few scenarios of
okay. Mhm.
How the police evaluation should go. Perhaps one simple open and shut case and one more complicated case.
Sure.
My understanding is it's gonna be part of the training we're doing in the coming weeks.
That's what I was led to believe as well from SMK.
Mhm.
Reverend, or sorry, Dr. Harrison, would you still like to have that motion on the floor?
I'd like it to be an expectation, yes.
Okay,
But nobody agrees with me, so the hell with it.
Okay. Mr. Dwyer Reynolds, were you going to say something?
Yes, I can see if we can get the case materials early, Dr. Harrison, and maybe circulate some of those.
That would be nice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Nixon, go ahead. Ms.
Are we discussing the new business issue about the letter?
We are, I was just going there.
Okay.
So, thank you. So, next is the proposal to send letter to mayor, council, and alliance regarding interviewing. And so, I believe it was 2 days ago, there was a letter sent to all of you about being able to interview incoming candidates from city council and the alliance. And I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the letters, if you have any questions, so I'll just open up the floor for that.
I thought the letter had already been sent.
No, it has not been sent. I apologize, you all. That was my fault for not clarifying. Letters have not been sent because you did not authorize them to be sent. So that was on me. So, but those letters are still waiting for you to look at and approve formally, if you want. Rabbi Settle, did you have a question?
No, but in the absence of discussion, I'd like to make a motion that we approve sending the letters once they're proofread.
Right? Yes, I did. I was made aware there was a misspelling, so that I missed as well. So I
Well,
apologize.
there's a word left out actually as well.
Okay, y'all.
Chair
My
Wilson,
mother's an English teacher. You're never going to get over this. So.
Chair Wilson, my mother's a proofreader, and I'm really hoping she's not watching the meeting right now.
Well, she is. She's watching this meeting, I bet. So poo on you. Okay. All right. So motion is, folks.
I'd like to know who left the letter, who left the word out.
No name shall be mentioned. We're gonna.
I'd like to
We're
get
gonna-
my mom's later this week, so we're not going to talk about it.
Oh,
I don't know. That dinner's looking kind of, I don't know, maybe. All right. So motion is to approve letters once they've been proofread and then submitted to city council after that.
Second.
Okay. All right. All in favor?
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Harvey votes yes, and Danielle in chat says she votes, she's read the letter and approves, so it's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Great. All right. And then the last part of new business that we have is that we have a personnel matter to discuss in executive session.
Before we go into section, I'm sorry, I have one more new business. Is that okay quickly?
Yes, please, go
Okay,
ahead.
I sent an email about it before, but I realized we can do it. We should do this in the meeting. Is that we sent a letter to the mayor asking that a member of the PAB be part of whatever group interviews and selects the new police chief. And we had talked about also circulating that for other organizations to also like the Alliance or whatever, to also contact the mayor's office to tell them that they support that idea. So I just thought we should decide whether we want to do that. Right.
Dr. Harrison?
And also just generally ask the community to let the mayor's office know that a member of the PAB should be part of that process.
I'd move approval.
Yep, I second.
Okay, all in favor, how do we vote?
Any discussion?
Sorry.
No discussion? Okay, moving forward.
Okay, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just Danielle, how do you vote? Okay, Danielle approves. That is unanimous.
Okay, all right, Dr. Harrison.
I would like to request, since staff has all this extra energy, I seem to recall, the open meeting law has an advisory council that you can write and ask advice on. And my memory is probably wrong, but what I recall is that in the past, before we started Zooming, you couldn't vote by phone. You could participate by phone, but you couldn't vote by phone. And somewhere it seems like I got the explanation that if you're on the phone, people can't tell whether there's a lobbyist sitting next to you telling you what to do. I think that same principle probably should obtain for Zooming. You shouldn't be able to vote if you can't see if you're not visible.
Oh, yeah, you mean.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, I can unfortunately mark Danielle as abstaining then.
Well, hold on.
No, that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking that Connor's underworked staff find that reference and bring it back to us so that we can discuss it, because it's not Danielle. I mean, we all do it. And the question is, how should we do it properly? That's all I'm saying.
You're going to invalidate half of the state's voting.
Mhm. Yeah, and security as well.
It's a very quick call I can make tomorrow. I know the staff over there, they've been wonderful support in the past.
Okay. Dr. Harrison, anything else? Okay. All right. So we are going to now to move into executive session to discuss a personnel matter. And all in favor of moving into, so sorry for a brief explanation. Open meetings law does allow that we move into executive session to discuss personnel matters. And so that is why we're going to executive session.
This is a matter relating to the potential discipline and promotion of a specific employee. So.
All right. All in favor of moving to executive session to discuss this matter?
Aye.
Thank you, Danielle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks unanimous.
We will adjourn.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight.